The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Bronx Roots, Michael Preminger, David Hubler. I'm Ralph Tycho. Nice to have you back, guys.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Good to yeah.
Michael, how you been?
I've been fine.
Good. Good.
Doing a little swimming.
Generally, I have something to talk about, and I set the tone. I'm going to surprise Michael. Michael, what do you want to talk about today?
Oh, well, first I want to say, because I just saw on the Internet, it says first boys rescued from the Thai cave.
Right.
4 of the 12
That's
boys.
That's a beautiful story. That's a heartwarming, beautiful story. I think they've got 4 kids out already out of the 12.
Yeah, it says 4 of the 12.
Right. And the coach will probably be the last one.
Well, they're going to leave the coach in there.
As punishment.
What did you do? You took these kids where?
Well, what are you, crazy? What's the Thai word for sugar?
The sugar?
Maybe that is the Thai word, as far as we know. But I've been following that pretty closely because of my day job. I write for a blog on emergency and disaster management. So that's one of the obviously disaster that's being managed. And I had several questions that are still really not even answered on this thing. I mean, first of all, this is a remote part of northern Thailand. What were they doing up there? Is this a team from that area? Or they certainly weren't up there to play a match. What were they? So why? And then why did they go into the cave in the first place? That's the one.
I understand they do it on a regular basis. That's part of their. This isn't a first-time thing.
For these kids?
Yeah. They, that's what Tally told me this morning.
Because one of the things I was curious about is
Tally, because she'll hit me. No, she won't.
But one of the other curious things about it is what kind of supplies did they go into the cave with? I mean, they were on the surface. Did they even bring in kind of flashlights or something? I mean, if they didn't, how in the world did they find their way through the cave? Because they're 2.5 miles back in the cave. And
how they've survived is amazing.
Right, exactly. They had no food. They might have had some snacks or something, but they certainly didn't prepare for, I guess, what is it now? It's 2 weeks. So you got at least 14 days there. And they, obviously they were real rookies at this thing because they didn't mark a pathway back out as they went in. So, I mean,
I think the water level changed.
Yeah, well, that's what happened. The rains came, and they kept moving back. But had they, they could have died there very quickly by being drowned, or by never being found, because apparently it's a cave with lots of tunnels, and it's part of a series of caves up there. So they were very fortunate, one, to be found, and two, now of course to be rescued. It's a 7-hour trip out of that cave.
Wow.
7 hours. It takes 6 hours for the divers to get down to them, and 7 hours for them to bring the kids back, because apparently they're going against the incoming current.
Wow.
And how tragic that one of the rescuers died.
Right. Yeah. He died because he ran out of oxygen, which is really, I guess, a diver's no-no. I mean, and he was putting in oxygen tanks along the path that they were going to use to escape. So, and the kids didn't know anything about scuba diving. That was another thing. And as far as I could read, they didn't know how to swim either. So it's just a very, very tricky, and it's when the Chilean miners were trapped in there for all that time. they at least, they knew where they were. They knew they were in an area where they had electronic equipment, radio equipment. So they were sort of prepared for this kind of thing. They weren't prepared for the cave-in, obviously, but at least they had some kind of knowledge of what to do in there. Well, these kids had nothing. The coach didn't know anything either. It's amazing.
Hey, I'm just thinking of the claustrophobia.
Yeah.
These kids.
Oh gosh.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't stand being enclosed in places like that.
Right.
With that in mind, I have a story to tell you. I lived in San Francisco when they had an anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I lived maybe a mile from the Golden Gate Bridge on Clement Street and 4th. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll go down. Everybody's going to walk on the bridge. They're going to close it off. And maybe I'll walk on the bridge, an historic event. And then the last minute, I thought to myself, or for some reason I didn't go, but I'm listening on the radio. And they had a sardine-like packed amount of people, packed in like sardines, and things weren't moving. And I'm listening on the radio to helicopters above, and the people packed together so tightly for what seemed like hours. It was, maybe 20, 30 minutes. And I'm thinking to myself, thank God I didn't go. I'd go nuts right in the middle of all these people, nowhere to go. So how do these kids, just the thought of that makes me shake right now, and it's
in total darkness
later.
too.
How do these kids stand just in the dark, no food?
Right.
Scary shit.
Dark.
Yeah.
They're going to be maimed for life.
I understand your feeling, Ralph. It once happened to me, but it was indoors. I was at a convention here in D.C., and one of the entertainers, now I'm trying to remember his name. He just died about a year or so ago. He did Johnny Be Good. He played the guitar. He had this sort of dance move that Michael J. Fox.
Chuck Berry?
Chuck Berry. Thank you. Chuck Berry was going to appear. So everybody got into the ballroom, and Chuck Berry did not appear. And a half hour after his show was due to go on, he still hadn't appeared. Anyway, the place was so crowded. I think I made it for about 45 minutes, and I said, I got to get out of here. I can't take it. And I forced my way out into the hallway, to the lobby there. And the feeling of relief was overwhelming, and I'm sure that's how you felt, Ralph, when you
Hey, I was listening to it on the frickin' radio. But it was just the thought of me being there, and I very well could have been, because it started out as a delightful thought where people get together on the bridge and they walk across, but it attracted more people than they expected and would have been nuts for me. Let alone being trapped in a cave, how that must be for those poor kids.
Well, I talk about a huge crowd going across a bridge. I have a friend in New York who is a photographer, and he's run a lot of marathons and stuff. And he was on the truck that precedes when they start the New York City Marathon. They started on Staten Island, and it ends in Central Park. So he was on the photographer's truck that was about 10 yards or whatever it is in front of the crowd, and he said when the massive number of runners got on that bridge, you could feel the bridge shake.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. I wouldn't want to be on that. And if you've been over the Verrazano Bridge, you know how high it is.
Yeah.
I think there were like 16,000 runners in the New York City Marathon.
Yeah. And nowadays, every time they have an event of any sort, you have to think terrorism. You have to be afraid of that, which means that they won right from the start.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be a lot of fun.
In people's heads,
right?
Changes your outlook on life, and it does collectively as a country. So
sure. And in one sense, it reduces the crowds themselves. I was started to say it used to be a lot of fun to go down to the mall on the 4th of July because the National Mall is so big. It can hold hundreds of thousands of people. Like it did for the Trump inaugural. It was 500,000, 200 million people. Anyway, I mean,
it was 30 people.
All you had to do. Because the mall stretched from like 3rd Street all the way up to 14th Street or so, even more. But the point was that there were plenty of places to walk onto the mall and find a place to sit down, because the fireworks took place behind the Washington Monument, so everybody could see it for miles around. Well, now you have to go through gates. Only a certain number of gates all the way around the mall to get in. They check all your bags. You can't get out. If you get out, you're not going to come back in. It's not the fun kind of event that it used to be.
It's changed the mindset of America, and that was right from 9/11.
Oh yeah.
And it did it instantaneously, where it was just a different mindset of the world, and it wasn't a positive change, that's for damn sure.
And it also changed a lot of the architecture here in Washington, too, because of all the ballards they put up to prevent cars from running into the White House lawn or things like that. The original, I mean, I used to go up to Capitol Hill and cover stories on Capitol Hill, and one of the fun things I did was I would go into the hearing rooms, the empty hearing rooms, and everybody, all the senators and congressmen, on their desk, they had these little notepads, and it always said, House Committee on Foreign Affairs in Washington D.C. And I collected a bunch of these to use. It's very impressive when you send somebody a note. Yeah. So I have a whole bunch of these things. Well, now, of course, first of all, you can't even get into the Congress buildings without some kind of reason, and then you can only go to certain areas. And all of the hearing halls are closed and locked when there's no one in them. So that too has changed a great deal. This is. It's sad. It's a really sad thing. The People's House and the People's Congress are no longer the People's House and the People's Congress because you can't get in so easily as you once did. When you think about it, I mean, Harry Truman used to take walks down Constitution Avenue when he was president.
Right.
And now that dopey, now former Secretary Administrator of EPA, he had to have armed guards within 24 hours. Well, it was a stupid ego move. But the point is that you don't get to see these people anymore. I mean, or you don't even have access. So, Lincoln used to sit in the White House, and people would come in to see him, or to complain or to do whatever it might be, and he held forth with these people. You can't do that anymore. You can't get anywhere near the White House.
And in a sense, you don't want to get anywhere near the White House.
Right.
Well, yeah. I tell you, every my wife likes to go to this. Every year at Hanukkah time, one of these Jewish organizations has a giant menorah up on what they call the ellipse, which is right next to the mall, and you go in there and you sit, and they have wonderful entertainment, music, the army band, and then and I've done this twice, and I never felt totally comfortable. Not only because you worry about some terrorist bomb going off, but you can take out a hell of a lot of Jews at one time at this event, you know. And of course you sit there from like 3 o'clock. Now,
same thing. That could happen in a library too. You know?
Oh yeah, but I mean this is an outdoor event on a big sprawling lawn.
Off a whole bunch of Jews, but yeah. That's something that even thinking along those lines,
right,
isn't good for your head.
I mean, when you think about it,
or is good for your head. As a survivor, as someone from a race of survivors, thoughts like that make sense. But to have to be surviving in the capital of your country,
right?
In Minden, it's crazy.
Well, part of the problem is too that this is supposedly a joyous holiday. So if you go into this gated area now, some of the joy is gone. I mean, I'm not a fearful person, but you have to think, hey, here we are all, in an area that's open pretty much. I mean, the fencing around it is only temporary. It's not like ballards or anything. I mean, somebody could drive off the road and right across the park and take out a good number of people before he got.
Absolutely. And that's something that's indefensible anywhere.
Of course.
Somebody could rent the van or this, that, and the other thing and just
right.
Go visit.
And that seems to be the mode of the preferred mode of assassinations these days, as opposed to planting large bombs. You're right. A rental truck driving across onto the ellipse could do a lot of damage.
Absolutely. A crazy world we live in.
What?
Question about that. So we have one positive thing that we talked about and one negative thing. Let's talk the positive thing.
So we talked about. I went to see Catcher Was a Spy, which we talked about last week.
Okay.
Tell us. Well, David you knew the whole story, so.
David, tell us, you wrote about it in your book.
Right.
The Nats.
Yeah.
And in the first chapter, you wrote about Mo Berg.
Right, because he played for the Washington Senators / Nationals for a while, and when he went over to Japan, I think he was with Washington at that time, so there was a reason to put him in the book. Because it was that era.
Was the movie
it was a good movie.
Was it?
Yeah, it was good, but it didn't tell you anything that you don't know already. He went over and he was sent over to kill the guy who they felt was working on the atomic bomb in Germany.
Right. Heisen, something like that.
Yeah, something with an H, right?
Heisenberg, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was good. I saw a bunch of movies. It's interesting. There's Paul Rudd playing Mo Berg, and the movie, like I say, is playing in one theater behind a 7-Eleven or something like that. And then he opens yesterday or Friday in Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of money. So I guess actors are smart. You take the small roles, you take the big parts in these movies, so you can do the smaller, more interesting movies.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. In fact, there was an interesting article. You go ahead.
I was watching Marshall last night. Did you ever see that?
No.
See, that's the thing. It's another movie. First of all, the title makes you think it's a Western.
Sure, right.
But it's about Thurgood Marshall.
Oh, that Marshall.
Yeah, what is wrong to give it that title because people don't know what it is.
Yeah, you're right.
And that was very interesting. That was good.
Hey, Michael, over the years as a movie writer, being entrenched in the business on one level or another, what's changed the most from when you got to California to the way they're doing things today in the movie business?
I would say, I haven't been really part of it for a long time, but I don't know, maybe some of these huge pictures, when I say huge pictures, all these comic book movies, that other movies have to be independent movies now that were once done by the studios. Because if it doesn't have action, this and that, I would say it's probably very hard to get made.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many people who can say no, and now there's even more so. You got to go through God knows how many people before you can get a script greenlit. So,
okay, I have one more question.
I wish I had a better answer, but I don't.
No, that's a good answer. Is the Harvey Weinstein thing certainly not on his level, but is it somewhat pervasive in the movie industry more than we would have thought before this Me Too thing came out? Would we still be surprised after everything that's come out, or do you think the bulk of it is, and we've had a lot, Woody Allen, all through the years. Is it getting better? Is it being identified properly? Can you speak to that at all?
I have a friend who a few years ago said, how Gwyneth Paltrow got her part on Shakespeare in Love, and it was like, how? What are you talking about? And he said something about Harvey Weinstein, and you thought even back a few years ago, well, the casting couch, did she sleep with him? But he said it was even worse than that. It was like under a table at a restaurant that this is what the guy told me. So he knew about all this stuff years ago. That, we know about it since probably the 20s, but it just seemed to get worse. And now I'm sure women are very, very careful, or men, if they're not, they're really stupid, because somebody's going to blow the whistle. So I'm glad it went through, but how bad it was just a few years ago that girls had to do to get a part.
I imagine it was even worse during the studio system, when they were locked in. There were all sorts of stories about what's her name, Marion Davies and Hearst. Yeah, all sorts of stories like that. Some of which may not be true, of course, but yeah, as you mentioned, the casting couch. Even here, I've heard of it, of course. It sort of goes along with the quote-unquote Hollywood myth. It wasn't a myth. It was really happening.
Okay.
And I think the women today are much more intelligent.
The two of you, what can shock anymore? What would surprise and shock?
Well, Trump does a good job of shocking me all the time. I can't believe what I'm seeing and reading and hearing. What you mean socially? Social.
I mean, in this world, I guess what I was thinking about subconsciously was Trump. What can he do next?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he's got a couple of options. He can either screw up NATO when he goes to the NATO conference this coming week, or he can screw up his meeting with Putin the following week. He's got two good shots at screwing up. And chances are he'll hit about 800 when he does, because he's going to, I can tell, you just feel it in your bones that he has no understanding of international events, affairs, how international the community interacts. He goes his own way. Even his own aides, who are candid about it, will say that. They can't tell him anything.
When that book came
but I don't
out,
understand when you say
writing,
about shocking. I just read an article that was in, yesterday's paper or something, about this nail factory. Is it in Missouri?
Oh, yeah. I know
because
what you mean.
of tariffs and may close. So in the article, the reporter interviewed some of the people who work there. And this one guy said, well, I might lose my job, but I'm still 100% behind Trump. He's doing a great job, and I would love to be able to shake his hand one day. And you go,
what?
Yeah. I mean, these people, as somebody said, it's a cult. It's really become, it doesn't matter what he does.
Right.
People are going to lose their job, and they still love him.
Yeah, there was a report on NPR this morning or yesterday, I forget. The woman reporter went out to the hinterland, the Midwest, to places in Ohio. Now, I don't consider Ohio sort of a backwater place. Ohio has, produced a good number of presidents. It's got some excellent schools, and anyway, the same thing, the same kind of attitude. We love him. We think he's the great. Well, it's the press. The press is making him out to be a fool. Well, and you say, wait a minute, how is this possible? How can you possibly believe these things? And yet they do. And even Congress, all the Republicans up there, they march lockstep with Trump. And Trump goes his own way. And the worst thing about it, I think, there are two criminal aspects. One, I think he's treasonous for his palling around with Putin. I mean, you just don't do that. And the other thing is that he's totally ignoring the Constitution. He's making millions hand over fist now from the White House. I'd like to have the money he makes just from his hotel down the street. Because it's first of all, it's extremely high end. I mean, you can't, if you went in there for lunch, it would probably run you $200. But the point is that hotel, everyone who comes to Washington, either to see him or to try to influence him, that's where they stay. They don't stay in the Marriotts anymore. They stay in the Trump International Hotel. And the very reason they do that is to curry favor with this guy. And so much of that money goes to him. So much of that money, it really is criminal. If Obama had done 1/100th of the things that this guy does, the Republicans would have yelled and screamed. You think about Obama going to North Korea. Unbelievable. They would yell and scream, awful, impeach him.
Now, do you blame Trump or do you blame the enablers? The Republican Party itself? All these guys, and the voters that voted for him. Let's assume that he is what he is. He was what he was, and they elected him anyway. He had a 13-year-old woman, 13-year-old girl, /woman, because she was acting as a prostitute, basically, suing him for statutory rape. he wouldn't give up his income tax returns.
Right.
And an X number of percent, whatever it was at the time, voted for this guy.
Yeah.
Who do you blame? Do you blame an opportunist like Trump, who the American way of capitalism says, yeah, you get a whole bunch of people to come into the hotel to worship you? And isn't that what greedy capitalism has become beyond just Trump? Capitalism, politics,
well, yeah, it's greed. Of course, that's the motivating factor behind all of this is his greed. I mean, the guy has enough money, and his kids have earned enough money on their own, partially using the Trump name, but nothing.
Well,
he's like the. Remember they named the Teflon Don? They couldn't convict him of anything. Well, Trump is the Teflon president. He gets away with murder. Literally, I mean, I'm convinced that he and the Russians have so many things going, so many deals that probably quasi-legal, that's what's keeping Trump on the so-called straight and narrow when it comes to Putin, because he's afraid some of this stuff will get out. I mean, I can't believe, look, anybody who's a big businessman, a big developer in New York, they know their way around all the illegalities, the mafia, the unions, all of these operations that operate maybe just above the surface for legitimacy. And Trump is in the middle of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Stanley in that I was going to ask the same question. What is it that makes like 50% of the people, like this guy in Missouri saying, I'd like to shake his hand. What is it that makes them believe this stuff and ignore what a pig he is?
Yeah, and ignore.
I just don't get it.
No. And you're right about that nail company, and they're not the only ones. Interestingly enough, the Canadians and the Chinese, who know a thing about the United States, for their retaliatory tariffs, have targeted targeted industries in those states that voted for Trump. And for example, in Iowa now, the tariff that's going to be, I think it started on Friday, if I'm not mistaken, levied against pork products that are Chinese, as we all know. Chinese eat tons and tons of pork, and the United States supplies a good amount of that. And also, we supply a great amount of soybeans to China. Those are going to be heavily taxed on a tariff. Farmers are already complaining that they can't put in a crop for next year because they don't know if the Chinese are going to buy any of it, because the tariff raises the price for them, the importers, so high. It's going to be a total disaster.
Well, here's something to think about, guys. Trump's mother and his wives are immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
Or his mother was an immigrant who came to this country literally barefooted. And for him to be thinking along the lines, to have developed an ideology against the spirit of this country, which was basically that we are a come together kind of thing. How do you tout a guy like that, who psychologically, who comes from a place where he grew up with, his mother raises him, must have had stories of what it was like. And
maybe. Yeah, no, you're right about that.
Is he an alien? Is he so closed off emotionally?
I think he is.
Yeah, I mean, emotionally, you're probably right, Ralph. I think that's a good point. I think it's all about him. I mean, even his pronouncements that might have some air of legitimacy to them, if it weren't for me, this would have happened. I'm the only one who could. I mean, it's always an I statement. I, or me. And you know, it's possible though. I mean, your point is well taken that that his mother, would probably have some horrendous stories to tell. But you know, that generation, and the succeeding generation, all the immigrants right up through World War II, they didn't like to talk about any of this. We've talked about this here. Is that, you know, there were so many secrets kept. Now you couldn't keep the secret that she was an immigrant because she probably spoke with an accent. But the stories that happened to these people prior to their arrival in the States, many of them hid all sorts of things and continue to do so here in the States. And he might be, you know, they don't always, but people refer to the self-loathing Jew who becomes less Jewish and becomes an anti-Semite. It could be the same thing with Trump. He became an anti-immigrant simply because his mother was an immigrant. And he, you know, he's ashamed of this.
Very good point. Very good point. So someone like that being president of the United States doesn't scare the shit out of all of us?
Sure it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what scares me is that if he gets a second term.
I can't imagine. I can't say that because 45% his popularity rises throughout this. And the story one of you guys told about the guy who says, I lost my job, this and that. Sure, but he's a good guy. I can't wait to meet him and shake his hands.
Yeah.
Hope you had the nails in your hands while you...
Good boy, yeah.
I'll shake your hands. Come over here, you fat fuck.
Michael Moore was on Bill Maher last week, not this Friday, but the week before. And he has a movie coming out, but he thinks unless the Democrats get the people out to vote, and they kept saying vote, that Trump's going to win again.
He was the first one, literally the first one I ever hear
predict
say that Trump was going to win the first election.
Yeah.
This guy has his finger on the pulse of America.
Yep.
Any comedian, as you guys know, is a sociologist, and I'm sure his roots started in comedy and, you know, putting these documentaries together and what have you. He knows what's out there. And you would think the Democrats would get it together and do this, that, and the other thing, but on some levels, it's one big party. They changed the labels. They stop the lines, changed the labels. Because why are they not in every Democrat? Should be an absolute uproar to this every day.
Sure.
Right? They are, but we don't hear it in an organized manner. We don't hear the leaders of the Democratic Party saying just what Michael Moore is saying. Hey, get the word out there, or this country is going down the tubes. And then I will ask you both if you remember what it was when Pelosi took over, basically in Bush's second term. They got the House back, and she didn't come down on Bush, as it were.
Well, that's the... What?
Pardon me?
What? No, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying she could have very easily, the Democrats could have very easily stopped some of what was going on that led us to where we are now. And they didn't.
Yeah,
so,
well...
Same lobbyists, it's all this, the health care. If these people can't, the Congress can't get by that they have free health care for the rest of their lives.
No, they pay into it. That's a myth. They pay into the government healthcare system, as I do, as I continue to do. They don't get free.
Oh, okay. I thought that once.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of people who think they get everything for free, but they don't.
Well, thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, I know. It's a mistake a lot of people make, and they're allegedly, supposedly, they do have an operating budget for their congressional office or Senate office, which they're not supposed to exceed. But of course, you get people in the right position, and they'll turn and look the other way. And that's what happened with what's his name, the former EPA administrator from Oklahoma. These people are so ingrained in this administration. My fear is that if Trump were ever to win a second term, when he can't be reelected, then all hell can break loose because there are no bounds at all. He won't. Right now he's already campaigning for the next election. But once that's over, and if he were to win a second term, he won't be a lame duck president, boy. He's going to be a vulture president.
And
to keep
it
the
goes
avian.
beyond that. He has openly said that he prefers to take away that term limitation on the president.
Well, he'll never get that. That's beyond even him.
I don't know. Who's he going to support for the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a Supreme Court. It has to be ratified by, 3/4 of the states.
Okay.
It's a constitutional amendment. So.
Who knows with this dictator?
I know. Well, I know. That's true. He acts like, and then if you say, well, he's reminiscent of Hitler and the early years of Nazi Germany, then the defenders say, oh, you can't say that. You can't say that. That's ridiculous. That's not ridiculous, unfortunately.
No, it's not.
It's not, and I felt that way for a long time until I started seeing things. He didn't at first want to put down the flags at half-mast for the journalists that were killed.
Right.
They had to go to him and say, wait a minute, Jack.
And this is just for one day.
Right. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So his respect for the press, or lack of respect for the press, is very reminiscent of early Nazi.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And many current historians have made reference to those kinds of comparisons.
Splitting up those kids wasn't the most heartless.
Yes, absolutely. He should be defeated just on that alone.
Just on that, he should be impeached.
Right. Yes. Because that's malfeasance in office. They came down very hard on W. For the lack of response to Katrina. And what did he do in Puerto Rico? He said they're lazy. They should go out and work. The island still isn't back to normal.
Katrina, it was a matter of Halliburton. They had money to fix those levees in place, and they took it away for the war effort, knowing that Katrina would happen, and eulogizing Mrs. Bush she's the one who stood up in the stadium when they had no bathrooms, overflowing, everybody displaced.
And they're in the Superdome in New Orleans?
Yeah. Kids. She says they have a place why are they complaining? They have a place to stay. And 3 or 4 years later, you eulogize this vermin of a cretin.
That's a combination.
I'm holding back.
Well, look what's going on the island is, what do they say? It's just about half re-electrified again. There are still areas all over
Puerto Rico, there are American citizens in Puerto Rico. This Puerto Rican, I don't know what the term what do we own or we control?
Yeah, it's a U.S. territory.
U.S. territory.
Yeah.
I mean, their skin is a little bit darker.
Some, not all, like everywhere else.
Not all, no. But, you may find a trace of a Spanish accent, and they could be Mexican.
Right. I mean, it's just awful, the whole thing.
It's awful.
It's a disgrace. The man is an utter disgrace and an international embarrassment. I had to call a company in Canada the other day because I needed a part, or I needed to get instructions on how to fix this. It was a bird feeder. They make them in Canada. Anyway, I asked the woman, I said, are you going to be open? This was on the 3rd of July. I said, are you going to be open tomorrow? She said, oh, yeah, of course. We know it's the 4th of July, but we celebrate our Canada Day before that. I said, yes, I was hesitant to ring up the 4th of July, figuring that you people are so upset with us. So she laughed. I said, well, on behalf of all Americans, I apologize for what we're doing to you. And she laughed again. The Canadians have a good sense of humor about these sorts of things. They've always been in sort of second place, and they don't mind it. They don't mind being considered they certainly don't mind being our neighbor, but I think a lot of them don't mind.
Another country he's insulting. How do you go about insulting Canada, for Christ's sake?
Yeah, of all people, right. Yeah, of all countries.
Right. I mean, they don't have drug lords. They're not throwing stuff across the border that's killing kids, this, that, if you can make that case.
Yeah.
You might say, how about you legalize it all and prescribe it and don't fight over it anymore, and that stuff will go away. But no, let's keep fighting that drug war, too.
Well, it's interesting.
Not wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, how Republicans will say, oh, well, their health care system stinks. Then people wait 8-9 months. They come into the United States to get the treatment. And there was one guy, I forget who it was. It was one of these Q&A kind of things on TV. It was on CNN. And he said, no, that's not true at all. He said, in fact, the Americans go north to Canada to get their prescriptions filled because they're much cheaper there. So that's another myth that the Republicans love to circulate. And they said the same thing about the national health system in Britain. And having lived under that system for 4 years, I can tell you that if you need surgery and it's imperative that you get it, you get it. If it's something that you can live with for a while, it may take a while to get it, but you don't pay. My wife has relatives over there, and when they were shocked. We were talking about that, and they said, one of the relatives there had a serious brain condition, and he was operated on and cured, and they said, he didn't lose his house, he didn't have to mortgage his home, he went on with his life. And I said to myself, and how much saner is that than this crazy system we have here, where people are literally forced into bankruptcy.
Widows and widowers go on paying the medical debts after they lose a loved one.
Yeah,
in this crazy world. And there are a lot of people who are ashamed to go bankrupt, and the percentage of bankruptcy over medical stuff in this country is astronomical.
Well, and those are the honest ones who actually make an effort to pay their bills.
Yeah,
what about the ones who just sort of walk away? Then the hospital has to charge. Yeah, the hospital then has to jack up prices for other people. It's just an awful system. It's just, after World War II, they should have just done what Britain did and go on, create a national health system. That was the time to do it. Right after the war ended, everybody was in a good mood. Everybody was optimistic about the future. We'd spent billions on helping Europe rebuild. We could have spent a few billions on our system and done a good.
That would have been nice.
Yep.
Good point.
Yep.
All right, guys, we've reached the end, and thank you. It's been cathartic for me, informative for me and enjoyable.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. Of course, I came thinking we were going to talk about Chinese hand laundries in the Bronx, but we'll get to we'll get to that next week.
Great way to end it. It's great. I can't think of the word, but stay tuned for next time when
we discuss.
Yes. We'll be back. Now a word from our sponsor.
Yes, right.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Please, as I've said before, box up some new and used children's books. Bring them to Head Start. You know the reasons why. Adios, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.